Dad's silent revenge.
I was sitting in my daughter's living room watching my 6-year-old grandson Brandon play with his tablet when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Carol Anderson, my next-door neighbor of 12 years. Carol never calls unless something's wrong. She's a retired nurse who's seen enough emergencies to know when to worry and when not to panic. "Leonard," she said, her voice tight with barely controlled alarm. "Are you home right now?" "No, I'm at Patricia's for dinner." "Why? What's happening?" "There's a moving truck in your driveway. A big one with professional movers. They're loading boxes into it right now. I'm watching them through my kitchen window. My name is Leonard Pierce. I'm 59 years old, a retired cybersecurity consultant living in Scottsdale, Arizona. For the past 3 years since my wife Dorothy passed from cancer, that house has been my sanctuary. Everything I owned, everything Dorothy and I built together over 35 years of marriage was stored in those rooms. Every photo, every memory, every piece of our life together. I stood up so fast I knocked over my coffee cup. "What do you mean loading boxes?" "I didn't hire any movers. Professional crew. I can see them clearly. They've got uniforms with company logos and everything. I took pictures of the license plate and the truck." "Should I call the police?" Before I could fully process what Carol was telling me, before the alarm could register completely in my mind, I heard something from across the room that made my blood freeze. My daughter Patricia exchanged a look with her boyfriend Nathan Miller. It wasn't a look of concern or confusion like you'd expect when someone hears their father's house is being robbed. It was the look of two poker players who just realized someone had seen their cards. Then Nathan laughed. A short, sharp, nervous sound that he immediately tried to disguise as a cough, pounding his chest theatrically. "Wrong pipe," he sputtered, his eyes watering with fake distress. "Sorry about that, but I'd spent 35 years in cybersecurity, analyzing behavioral patterns, detecting insider threats, and catching people in digital lies. I'd investigated corporate espionage, tracked down hackers, and built cases against white-collar criminals who thought they were too smart to get caught. I knew guilt when I heard it. I knew panic when I saw it. "Dad, I'm sure it's nothing," Patricia said, her voice a little too bright, a little too quick. "Probably just Amazon delivery at the wrong address. You know how those GPS systems get confused in your neighborhood. Remember when UPS left that patio furniture at the Hendersons' place by mistake?" Nathan nodded enthusiastically. "She's right. Happens all the time in these suburban developments. All the houses look the same to delivery drivers. Let's just finish dinner and then we can all go check together." No need to panic over a simple mix-up, but I'd already seen it. That flash of genuine panic in my daughter's eyes, quickly masked by false reassurance. The way Nathan couldn't look at me directly after his inappropriate laughter. The subtle change in body language that spoke louder than their words ever could. Every instinct I'd developed over decades of security work was screaming that something was terribly wrong. More than wrong. Something calculated and deliberate was happening at my house. And the two people sitting across from me knew exactly what it was. I pulled a $20 bill from my wallet and placed it on the coffee table. "Carol, call the police. Tell them possible break-in in progress." I kissed Brandon on the forehead, breathing in that sweet little boy smell that reminded me so much of Dorothy's gentle nature. "Grandpa has to go check on something important, buddy." "Be good for your mom, Dad. Really, you're overreacting," Patricia called after me as I headed for the door. "It's probably nothing. Why don't you just call the house first and see if anyone answers?" I turned back to look at her, my beautiful daughter, who had Dorothy's warm brown eyes and my stubborn determination. The little girl I'd taught to ride a bike, helped with homework, walked down the aisle at her first wedding. The woman who'd moved back home after her divorce, claiming she needed time to get back on her feet financially. Because, I said quietly, someone with a key to my house wouldn't answer the phone. The drive home felt like the longest 15 minutes of my life. My hands gripped the steering wheel as I ran through possibilities. Maybe Patricia was right. Maybe it was just a delivery mistake. Maybe my cybersecurity background was making me paranoid, seeing threats where none existed. But deep down, I knew better. In 35 years of investigating digital crimes and corporate fraud, I'd learned that coincidences were rare. When multiple unusual things happened simultaneously, there was usually a connecting thread. And that thread often led back to someone with inside access. Someone trusted. Someone who knew exactly how to exploit the victim's vulnerabilities. The moving truck was gone by the time I arrived at my house. In its place was an absence that felt almost physical, like a tooth that had been yanked out, leaving behind only empty space and the lingering taste of blood. I stood in my driveway, staring at the fresh tire marks on the concrete, and felt the first wave of true fear wash over me. This wasn't random. This wasn't a mistake. Someone had planned this carefully, timing it precisely for when I'd be away. Someone who knew my schedule, knew I'd be at Patricia's house for our regular Sunday dinner. Someone who had the security codes to disable my alarm system and the keys to unlock my front door without leaving any signs of forced entry. Carol met me at my front steps, her face lined with worry and determination. "I got everything," she said, pressing her smartphone into my trembling hands. Photos of the truck, the license plate, the movers, even some video of them carrying boxes. I didn't know what else to do, but I figured you'd want evidence. I spent the next 4 hours going through every piece of mail from the past year. Dorothy used to tease me about keeping everything, filing every statement and receipt in chronological order. Now that obsessive habit might save my financial life. I found what I was looking for buried in a stack from 9 months ago. A letter from Arizona Notary Services thanking me for using their mobile service and expressing satisfaction with Sharon Davis, the notary who had visited my home on June 15th. According to my calendar, I'd been at my annual physical that entire morning. Patricia had driven me to that appointment. She'd insisted on driving, actually saying she was worried about me managing the fasting blood work and the stress tests. I remembered being grateful for her concern. Now I realized she'd needed me out of the house for at least 3 hours, so Sharon Davis could witness her forging my signature. Patricia had known my exact schedule. She'd arranged for the notary to come while I was gone. She'd signed documents transferring ownership of my house using my own daughter's handwriting skills and my complete trust in her. My own daughter had been planning this theft for the better part of a year. The next morning, I thought about confronting Patricia directly. The father in me wanted to believe there was some explanation that would make sense of all this. Maybe someone had stolen her identity too. Maybe Nathan had manipulated her into this without her understanding the consequences. But the cybersecurity consultant in me knew better. Confrontation would give her time to prepare counter-narratives, time to destroy additional evidence, time to craft stories that would make me doubt what I'd discovered. I'd seen too many corporate fraud cases where early confrontation allowed criminals to cover their tracks. I needed professional help from someone who understood both the technical and legal complexities of what I was facing. Someone who could navigate federal fraud statutes and digital evidence preservation. I called Timothy Walsh, a retired FBI cybercrimes agent I'd worked with on several major corporate cases over the years. We'd spent months together in conference rooms, building digital evidence trails against white-collar criminals who thought they were smarter than the system. I never imagined I'd need his expertise for my own family. "Leonard," Tim said when I finished explaining everything, "what you're describing is a textbook case of elder financial abuse by a family member. It's unfortunately more common than most people realize. The sophistication level, using your security codes, knowing your filing system, timing the notary visit around your medical appointments, tells me this was meticulously planned by someone with intimate access to your daily routine." "I know," I said, feeling the weight of that knowledge. "I need you to help me prove it legally." Tim's approach was methodical and strategic. "Here's what we're going to do. First, we subpoena Sharon Davis and get her testimony about who actually appeared at your house that day. Notaries are required to verify identity, and she'll have to explain how she witnessed a signature from someone who wasn't you. Second, we pierce the corporate veil on that Delaware LLC and find out who really controls it. Third, we trace every dollar of that $37,000–$80,000 after it left the credit union. Money leaves digital footprints, especially when it moves between institutions." He paused, meeting my eyes with the sympathy of someone who'd seen too many families destroyed by financial crime. "And fourth, we do all of this without Patricia knowing we're investigating. You need to continue acting completely normal around her. Can you handle that?" I'd spent 35 years maintaining professional composure while investigating criminals. I could manage it a little longer, even when the criminal was my own daughter. The hardest part was continuing our weekly dinners at her apartment. Sitting across from Patricia and Nathan, making small talk about Brandon's progress in kindergarten, listening to their financial complaints, all while knowing they'd systematically stolen my financial security. Patricia showed me photos from a recent vacation to Hawaii, a trip that must have cost $12,000 based on the resort photos and first-class airline boarding passes she proudly displayed. Nathan complained about cash flow problems in his construction business, how hard it was to keep good crews when projects got delayed. They were literally spending my stolen money while asking for my sympathy about their financial struggles. The psychological warfare was exhausting. Every smile felt forced. Every expression of concern for their well-being felt like swallowing glass, but I maintained the performance because I understood that gathering legally admissible evidence required patience and strategic thinking. Tim's investigation moved faster than I'd expected. Digital fraud leaves comprehensive paper trails, and Tim had maintained contacts throughout the financial services industry who could expedite certain requests through proper legal channels. Sharon Davis, the notary, broke within 2 hours when confronted with evidence that she'd notarized fraudulent documents. When Tim's investigator showed up at her home office, with copies of the forged quitclaim deed and clear documentation that I'd been at a medical appointment during the supposed signing, she immediately admitted everything. She confirmed that Patricia had hired her mobile notary service. Patricia had presented the documents and signed my name while Sharon pretended not to notice that the supposed Leonard Pierce was actually a woman 25 years younger than the date of birth on the identification she'd provided. Sharon had been paid $500 in cash to look the other way, minus 5 times her normal fee. The Delaware LLC investigation led us to Mitchell Crane, a local attorney who specialized in what he euphemistically called asset protection services. When we cross-referenced his client database through court records and business filings, Nathan's name appeared on 8 different failed construction LLCs over the past 5 years, including one with an outstanding civil fraud judgment from a pension fund he'd supposedly managed. Nathan wasn't just a failed businessman. He was a serial fraud artist who'd found the perfect cover story in romantic relationships with women who had access to family money. But the money trail provided the most damaging evidence against both of them. Using financial forensics software I'd helped develop during my consulting days, we traced every electronic transfer of the stolen $380,000. The money had been moved from Arizona Community Credit Union to Pierce Family Holdings' Wells Fargo account, then immediately distributed in a pattern that revealed their priorities and planning. $14,500 had paid off Nathan's credit card debts, minus cards I discovered were maxed out on everything from gambling losses to high-end electronics. $20,000 went as a down payment on a vacation house in Sedona that was titled exclusively in Patricia's name. $75,000 had been moved into a Charles Schwab brokerage account that showed aggressive day trading activity with consistent losses. The remaining $40,000 had been withdrawn as cash over the past 8 months through ATMs in Las Vegas, Phoenix, and Tucson. They'd burned through 40% of my house's equity in 8 months, with nothing to show for it except debt payments and failed investments. Even worse, Tim's digital forensics team had discovered email communications between Patricia and a Phoenix real estate agent named Jennifer Martinez. The emails, recovered through a subpoena of Patricia's Gmail account, revealed that she was planning to list my house for sale within the next 6 weeks. The asking price was $925,000. Using the fraudulent quitclaim deed to establish ownership, she planned to pocket the entire proceeds while I would have no legal standing to stop the sale. According to Maricopa County records, I didn't own the house anymore. Reading those emails felt like watching someone plan my funeral while I was still breathing. Patricia had calculated everything: the listing price, the closing timeline, even which title company to use for the fastest processing. She'd researched comparable sales in my neighborhood and identified the optimal marketing strategy for maximum return. My daughter hadn't just stolen from me. She'd become a real estate professional at liquidating my life's work. Tim laid out the prosecution strategy with the precision of someone who'd built hundreds of federal cases. We have enough evidence to convict them on multiple felony charges: wire fraud, bank fraud, elder abuse, identity theft, notary fraud. The federal prosecutor will have his pick of statutes. But we want more than convictions. We want them on record admitting what they did, creating an unshakable confession that eliminates any possibility of appeals or reduced sentences. His plan required Patricia and Nathan to feel completely comfortable, to believe they'd successfully manipulated me into accepting their version of events. We're going to give them exactly what they think they want: your willing cooperation in liquidating your assets. But they're going to confess every detail while we record it all. The psychological chess game began immediately. I started dropping hints during our dinners about feeling overwhelmed by house maintenance. I mentioned concerns about property taxes and utility costs. I asked Nathan's advice about downsizing and retirement communities, watching his eyes light up as he sensed opportunity. Patricia responded exactly as Tim had predicted. She began bringing up articles about seniors who'd been hurt in home accidents, stories about elderly people being taken advantage of by maintenance contractors, statistics about the financial burden of large homes on fixed incomes. She was building a narrative that would justify my decision to sell while positioning herself as the concerned daughter protecting her father from poor choices. The manipulation was textbook elder abuse psychology. Isolate the victim, create dependency, generate fear about independent decision-making, then present yourself as the solution to problems you've helped create. I'd seen this pattern in corporate settings where executives groomed employees for embezzlement schemes. But Patricia had made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated her father's professional competence. 5 days before the planned real estate listing, I invited Patricia and Nathan to dinner at my house. I told them I wanted to discuss estate planning and get their advice about possibly selling the house. I watched Patricia's face when I said those words and saw the flash of excitement she tried to disguise as concern. "Of course, Dad," she said. "We've actually been worried about you rattling around in this big place. It's time we had this conversation." Nathan nodded sympathetically. "There are some beautiful senior communities in North Scottsdale, places where you wouldn't have to worry about yard work or pool maintenance." I spent the entire day preparing Dorothy's famous pot roast recipe, setting the table with our wedding china, creating an atmosphere of family intimacy and trust. Tim's team had installed recording equipment throughout my dining room, audio devices hidden in light fixtures, cameras disguised as smoke detectors, everything legally authorized by federal warrants. They arrived at 600 with Brandon, and watching my grandson run into my arms almost shattered my resolve. This little boy was about to watch his mother get arrested. He would grow up knowing his family was built on lies and theft, but I couldn't let sentiment override justice. Too many families had been destroyed by people exactly like Patricia and Nathan. If I didn't stop them here, they would find other victims, other elderly relatives to exploit. Over dinner, I guided the conversation carefully, following Tim's script. I expressed concerns about my ability to maintain the house. I worried aloud about the financial burden of property taxes and insurance. I asked their honest opinion about whether I should consider selling. Patricia and Nathan responded like predators sensing wounded prey. They painted vivid pictures of the dangers I faced living alone. What if I fell and couldn't reach a phone? What if contractors took advantage of my age and charged excessive fees? What if the housing market declined and I lost equity value? "The truth is, Dad," Patricia said, placing her hand over mine in a gesture of fake intimacy, "Nathan and I have been researching options for you. We found this amazing retirement community in Paradise Valley. It has everything: golf, swimming, meal service, medical care on site, and the entry fee is very reasonable." "How reasonable?" I asked, playing my role perfectly. "Only $400,000, Nathan said. "And that includes everything. You'd never have to worry about home maintenance again." "But I'd need to sell the house to afford that," I said, letting uncertainty creep into my voice. "Well, yes," Patricia said, "but that's probably for the best anyway. This place is way too much house for one person, and the market is really strong right now." They were walking directly into the trap Tim had designed, confessing their scheme while genuinely believing they were manipulating me into voluntary compliance. "Actually," I said, reaching under my chair for the manila folder Tim had prepared, "I've been doing some research of my own about selling the house." Patricia's eyes brightened with anticipation. Nathan leaned forward eagerly. "That's wonderful, Dad," Patricia said. "We're so proud of you for being proactive about this." "I've learned some very interesting things," I continued, keeping my voice steady. "For instance, I discovered that someone already transferred ownership of this house 8 months ago to something called Pierce Family Holdings, LLC. The change in the room was immediate and electric. Patricia's face went white. Nathan knocked over his wine glass, red liquid spreading across Dorothy's tablecloth like spilled blood. "Dad, I can explain," Patricia started. "Please don't interrupt," I said, opening the folder. "I'm not finished. I also discovered that someone took out a $380,000 home equity line of credit using my identity. Someone who had my social security number, my security codes, and intimate knowledge of my daily schedule." Nathan was calculating escape routes with his eyes, looking toward the front door, then the back patio. His body language screamed guilty flight response. "The money trail is particularly fascinating," I continued. pulling out bank statements, $145,000 paid off credit card debts, $20,000 down payment on a Sedona vacation house, $75,000 lost in day trading, $40,000 in cash withdrawals from Las Vegas ATMs. Patricia was crying now, but I recognized them as manipulative tears designed to generate sympathy rather than genuine remorse. And then there are the emails I said, producing printouts of her correspondence with the real estate agent planning to list my house next month for $925,000. Using forged documents to establish ownership of property you stole. Please don't try to run, I added calmly as Nathan started to rise. There are FBI agents positioned outside every exit. As if summoned by my words, Tim Walsh walked through my front door, followed by 3 federal agents in bulletproof vests. The recording equipment had been transmitting everything to a mobile command unit parked across the street. Patricia Pierce and Nathan Miller. Tim announced, "You're under arrest for wire fraud, bank fraud, elder financial abuse, and identity theft." The next hour was controlled chaos. Patricia sobbed hysterically while being handcuffed, alternating between claiming innocence and begging for forgiveness. Nathan maintained sullen silence, the behavior of someone who'd been through this process before. Brandon cried in confusion as strangers took his mother away. I held him and tried to explain that sometimes people make very bad choices, even people we love. The words felt inadequate, but truth often does. In the weeks that followed, the full scope of their criminal enterprise became clear. Nathan had been running variations of this scheme for years, targeting elderly relatives and business partners across 3 states. Patricia hadn't been manipulated into compliance. She'd been his partner from the beginning. They'd already defrauded Nathan's uncle in Tucson out of $220,000 through a similar real estate scam. They were actively planning to target my sister-in-law, Linda, next, having already researched her property values and financial situation. Federal prosecutors offered Nathan a plea deal if he would testify against other accomplices in his network. He took it, providing evidence that led to 6 additional arrests across Arizona and Nevada. Patricia, confronted with the overwhelming digital evidence and her recorded confession, pleaded guilty to avoid trial. The judge showed no sympathy during sentencing. Patricia received 4 years in federal prison. Nathan got 6 years. The judge specifically noted that crimes against elderly family members represented a particularly heinous violation of trust that warranted enhanced penalties. My house was legally restored to my name. The fraudulent liens were removed from the title. The Sedona vacation house was seized and sold, along with other assets they'd purchased with stolen money. The recovery process netted approximately $140,000, though most of my equity was gone forever. Brandon now lives with my sister-in-law Linda in Tempe, who's providing the stability and consistency he needs. I see him every weekend. We build model airplanes, work on math homework, and I tell him stories about his grandmother, Dorothy, the woman who would have loved him with fierce protection. I don't tell him the complete truth about his mother yet. That burden will come when he's older and better equipped to process it. For now, he knows that his parents made some very bad decisions and are facing the consequences. I still have weekly dinners, but now with Carol and Tim at our old restaurant in Scottsdale. We talk about normal things, golf scores, book recommendations, grandchildren's achievements. Sometimes I catch myself starting to mention something about Patricia, then remembering she's not part of my life anymore. The emotional aftermath has been more complex than I expected. I don't feel satisfaction about Patricia's imprisonment. I don't feel vindicated or victorious. I feel something colder and more permanent, like scar tissue that's healed but never stops reminding you of the injury. This experience taught me that unconditional love and unconditional trust are dangerously different things. You can love someone completely while still protecting yourself from their worst impulses. Trust must be earned and maintained through consistent behavior, not assumed based on family relationships. I also learned that professional skills don't become obsolete in retirement. For 35 years, I'd tracked digital criminals and analyzed financial fraud patterns. When crime came to my own doorstep, perpetrated by my own blood, those same analytical abilities saved everything I'd worked my entire life to build. Some people have asked if I regret turning in my own daughter. They suggest that family loyalty should have protected her from legal consequences, that blood relationships create obligations that supersede justice. To those people, I have a simple answer. Patricia stopped being my daughter the moment she decided I was merely an asset to be liquidated. I owed her my love, and I will always love the child she used to be. but I didn't owe her my financial security, my home, or my silence in the face of systematic theft. What would you have done in my position? Elder financial abuse destroys families for generations, but staying silent about it destroys even more families because predators always find new victims once they've perfected their methods. The most dangerous criminals are often the ones who sleep in your guest bedroom, attend your family dinners, and know exactly which emotional buttons to push to keep you from asking the hard questions.